Back to the Future wasn't just another 1980s sci-fi comedy. It was a high-wire act of chaos, creativity, and near disaster that somehow rewrote pop culture forever. Behind the gleaming stainless steel car and Marty McFly's skateboard tricks lay production disasters, dangerous stunts, cast meltdowns, and studio interference that nearly derailed everything. Today, we're unraveling 20 weird facts about Back to the Future, secrets that even hardcore fans might not know. From the actor who was secretly fired, to stunts that nearly killed crew members, to a hidden controversy that haunted Universal, these are the untold stories of Hill Valley. And stick around until the end for a bonus fact so strange, it bends time itself. Let's dive in. 1. Eric Stoltz. Was Marty McFly? First, most audiences can't imagine anyone but Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly. But here's the twist. The role was originally filmed with actor Eric Stoltz. For 6 long weeks, Stoltz shot scenes, learned stunts, and even recorded lines. Yet something felt off. His dramatic approach clashed with the film's comedic rhythm. Director Robert Zemeckis and producer Steven Spielberg made a brutal decision. They fired him mid-shoot. It wasn't just awkward, it was expensive. Entire sequences had to be reshot, doubling costs and exhausting the crew. Christopher Lloyd, who played Doc Brown, later admitted he didn't even realize Stoltz had been fired until a new Marty showed up on set. Audiences never saw those original takes, but buried in studio archives are reels of a Back to the Future that almost starred someone entirely different. It wasn't comedy, it was tragedy waiting to happen. 2. Michael J. Fox. Filmed on 2 sets at once. When Michael J. Fox finally replaced Stoltz, there was another problem. He was already committed to the hit TV show Family Ties. His schedule was insane. By day, he filmed sitcom scenes until evening. By night, he raced to Universal Studios to film Marty McFly. Some days he worked 20 hours straight, grabbing naps in cars between sets. Crew members recalled seeing him stumble through dailies, half awake, yet still nailing takes. His skateboard stunts, his high-energy banter, his quick timing, all captured while running on fumes. Not X, but Y. Fox wasn't just acting, he was surviving. The exhaustion nearly broke him, but it also gave Marty his manic, desperate energy. Every laugh audiences gave was bought with brutal fatigue. That blur of day and night work schedules created a performance that looked effortless, but behind the camera, it was pure chaos. 3. The DeLorean almost didn't exist. The stainless steel DeLorean became a cultural icon, but it was nearly scrapped. In early drafts, the time machine wasn't a car at all, it was a refrigerator. Yes, the script originally had Marty climbing into a souped-up fridge for his time-traveling jumps. Spielberg worried children might imitate the stunt and get trapped inside. Appliances, so the team switched to a vehicle. The DeLorean was chosen not for style, but because its gull-wing doors looked futuristic on screen. Yet the car was notoriously unreliable. Mechanics had to constantly push it on set because its engine failed mid-takes. Sometimes it leaked fluids during close-ups. Crews cursed it daily. What audiences didn't know was that the coolest car in cinema was actually one of the worst vehicles Hollywood ever relied on. Not futuristic. Frustrating. 4. Crispin Glover's wild on-set behavior. George McFly, Marty's awkward father, was brought to life by Crispin Glover's bizarre, twitchy performance. But behind the camera, Glover was unpredictable. He questioned script lines, demanded rewrites, and even improvised without warning. Crew members called him erratic, while co-stars felt uneasy around his intense energy. During one infamous moment, he refused to say a line because he claimed it was morally wrong. Zemeckis nearly fired him but kept rolling, hoping the weirdness would translate into authenticity. It did, but the fallout was brutal. When Glover clashed over pay for the sequels, he was replaced. In Part 2, filmmakers controversially used prosthetics and old footage to fake his presence, sparking a lawsuit that changed Hollywood contracts forever. It wasn't method acting, it was madness captured on celluloid. 5. The clock tower scene. Nearly killed a stuntman. The film's climactic sequence, Marty racing against lightning to return home, was more dangerous than audiences ever realized. Stuntman Bob Yerkes was strapped to safety rigs while dangling high above Hill Valley's courthouse square. But one miscalculation nearly killed him. A wire snapped during rehearsal, dropping him several feet before backup harnesses caught the fall. Crew members froze, convinced they'd just witnessed a fatality. The scene continued only after extra precautions were added, but the tension never left the set. What audiences see as thrilling spectacle was built on real danger. Every spark, every swing from that clock tower came with risk. It wasn't just movie magic, it was life or death work disguised as entertainment. 6. Universal hated the title. Believe it or not, Universal executives didn't want the film to be called Back to the Future. Sid Sheinberg, the studio head, sent Zemeckis a memo suggesting the title be changed to Spaceman from Pluto. He argued that kids wouldn't understand the concept of going back to the future, but they'd flock to a movie with space aliens in the title. Spielberg, amused, wrote back pretending it was a joke, thanking Sheinberg for his humorous suggestion. The embarrassment forced the executive to drop it. Without that clever deflection, the film might have been saddled with one of the worst titles in cinema history. Imagine posters reading Spaceman from Pluto instead of Back to the Future. Not iconic, not timeless, just ridiculous. Spielberg's memo didn't just save a title, it saved the movie's entire identity. 7. Leah Thompson had to act opposite. Two different Martys. For actress Leah Thompson, who played Lorraine Baines, the production was especially confusing. She first acted opposite Eric Stoltz as Marty, then months later reshot the same scenes with Michael J. Fox. Thompson later admitted the process was emotionally exhausting. Stoltz brought a brooding, intense energy, while Fox played everything light and quick. She had to constantly adjust her performance, pretending her character felt the same way toward two completely different personalities. Even kissing scenes had to be redone, creating awkward déjà vu for the cast and crew. What audiences didn't know was that every flirtatious glance, every teenage crush moment had a ghost haunting it. Two Martys, two realities, one stitched-together movie. Not just reshoots, an entire parallel timeline of acting that never made it to theaters. 8. The Libyan terrorist scene. Used real guns. The chase scene where Marty is attacked by Libyan terrorists was no Hollywood illusion. The production rented real AK-47s and rocket launchers, sparking safety concerns among the crew. In the mid-1980s, prop restrictions were looser, and the weapons were only partially disabled. Actors handled them with caution, but even Christopher Lloyd later admitted the scene felt unnervingly authentic. Add to that the DeLorean's erratic engine, which often stalled during takes, and you had chaos brewing. A single mistake could have meant disaster. What looks like a comedic chase on screen carried the shadow of very real danger off screen. It wasn't harmless slapstick. It was a gamble with high stakes, actors racing, weapons locked, and tension so thick you could feel it through the dailies. 9. The Johnny B. Goode scene sparked a copyright dispute. One of the most iconic moments in the film is Marty shredding Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Goode at the 1955 school dance. But here's the kicker. Universal initially didn't secure proper clearance for the performance. The studio assumed Berry's publisher would approve it as a nostalgic reference, but legal questions quickly surfaced about whether the scene implied Marty invented rock and roll. Some critics even accused the movie of cultural erasure. Though Berry himself reportedly enjoyed the reference, His publisher pushed for higher licensing fees after realizing the scene's cultural power. What audiences didn't know is that the sequence almost didn't make it to home video intact. Not just a song, a cultural lightning rod. The dance floor that launched Marty back to the future almost triggered a legal battle that lasted years. 10. Michael J. Fox did his own skateboard stunts. Mostly Marty McFly's skateboarding antics became a pop culture phenomenon, inspiring a new wave of board culture in the 80s. But while Fox performed some of the tricks himself, dangerous maneuvers were handled by professional skater Per Wallinder. Still, Fox insisted on riding in key shots, even when sleep-deprived from his brutal schedule. In one rehearsal, he wiped out hard, nearly spraining his wrist. Producers panicked, warning him not to risk injury since filming was already delayed. But Fox's insistence on authenticity gave Marty his fluid, natural style on screen. Audiences saw a confident teen gliding through town, but what they didn't see was the exhaustion, the bruises, and the real stunt talent filling in the gaps. It wasn't just Hollywood tricks. It was sweat, risk, and sometimes pain. And before we roll into the next 10 secrets, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the craziest behind-the-scenes disasters are still to come, including near-death electrocutions, shocking studio meddling, and a finale that almost never happened. 11. The lightning strike almost fried the set. The climactic clock tower. Lightning strike looks like pure movie magic, but it wasn't entirely staged. During one late-night shoot, an electrical rig malfunctioned, sending a surge of current across metal scaffolding. Crew members scrambled, fearing someone would be electrocuted. Sparks showered onto the set, and the smell of burning wires filled the air. Production halted for hours while electricians inspected every cable. Bob Gale, the screenwriter, later joked that it felt like the movie itself was daring us to play with time. The incident left everyone shaken, but it also pushed the team to tighten safety protocols. What audiences saw was a perfectly timed bolt of fate. What the crew lived through was a brush with disaster that could have rewritten history in the worst way. Not staged, nearly fatal. 12th. Doc Brown's look was inspired by Einstein. Christopher Lloyd's eccentric performance as Doc Brown wasn't just wild invention, it was carefully modeled. Lloyd combined the mannerisms of conductor Leopold Stokowski with the hair and intensity of Albert Einstein. His wide-eyed bursts of energy and sudden pauses came from studying old footage of geniuses at work. But Lloyd also insisted on rehearsing with props, fumbling with gadgets until they felt second nature. He wanted Doc to look like someone who lived inside his inventions. Not caricature, but authenticity wrapped in chaos. The effect was electric, a scientist who was half madman, half savior. Fans laughed, but they also believed he could harness lightning. What they didn't know was that every twitch, every hair-raising shout of "Great Scott!" was born from meticulous study and a vision of brilliance colliding with mania. 13. The mall scene had a hidden tragedy. The opening mall sequence, shot at Puente Hills Mall in California, became an iconic backdrop for Marty's first Delorean jump. But few know the location carried a haunting backstory. Just months before filming, the mall had been the site of a fatal robbery attempt, leaving locals uneasy about returning there at night. Some crew members claimed they felt bad vibes during overnight shoots, which stretched until dawn. Yet the irony is striking. A scene meant to symbolize youthful adventure and possibility was staged in a place shadowed by real-world violence. The film turned the mall into a pop culture landmark, but its darker history was quietly erased. Not just a mall, a collision of Hollywood spectacle and lingering tragedy, hidden beneath the neon glow. 14. The ending almost looked totally different. The ending, where Doc Brown bursts into the McFly driveway, dressed in futuristic gear, wasn't the original plan. Early drafts ended with Marty returning home and simply collapsing into bed, exhausted. Test audiences found it underwhelming. So Zemeckis and Gale rewrote the ending on the fly, adding Doc's dramatic arrival and the hover-converted Delorean. The famous line, "Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads," wasn't even in the script until the last minute. It transformed a tidy ending into a thrilling cliffhanger that set up sequels. Not quiet resolution, explosive promise. That rewrite didn't just change the ending, it created one of the most quoted final lines in cinema history, launching a franchise that kept audiences chasing the future. 15. The fire trails were real gasoline burns. When the Delorean hits 88 miles per hour and disappears in a blaze of light, it leaves behind 2 flaming tire trails on the asphalt. Unlike today's CGI fire, those burns were practical effects, strips of gasoline carefully laid out and ignited at just the right moment. Crew members held extinguishers just off camera, ready to douse the flames if they spread out of control. The effect was dangerously unpredictable. Once, the fire leapt too close to a set wall, forcing grips to scramble. What looks like a clean, glowing line of fire on screen was actually chaos barely contained. Not digital wizardry, not safe simulation. Real fire licking across real pavement, captured forever as if the future itself had scorched the earth. 16. The town square was recycled movie history. Hill Valley's famous courthouse square wasn't built for Back to the Future. It was a recycled Universal backlot set that had appeared in countless films and TV shows, from To Kill a Mockingbird to episodes of The Twilight Zone. By the time Michael J. Fox was racing through it on a skateboard, the square had already lived a dozen cinematic lives. The production team transformed it with neon shops, diners, and a retro 1950s aesthetic, but sharp-eyed viewers can still spot pieces from earlier productions. Ironically, the timeless town square was a Hollywood illusion made of plywood and recycled facades. Not a real town, a cinematic chameleon. The fact that it became so iconic that fans visit it as if it were real is proof of the film's immersive magic. Hill Valley was built from Hollywood ghosts. 17th time travel logic drove. Writers Crazy Zemeckis and Gale wrestled with the paradoxes of time travel every day. Continuity errors lurked in every draft. Would Marty fade if his parents didn't kiss? Would the DeLorean always return to the same location in 1985? Script notes filled with diagrams, arrows, and desperate calculations. Gale later admitted they were making up rules as we went, hoping the audience wouldn't notice the inconsistencies. Even crew members got confused during shoots, asking which version of reality they were in. Not airtight physics, patchwork storytelling. Yet the contradictions gave the film its unique energy. It wasn't about hard science, it was about emotional logic. The wild ride worked because audiences cared about Marty's family more than Einstein's theories. But behind the scenes, the writers nearly lost themselves in the loops. 18. Huey Lewis almost turned down the music. The soundtrack that powered Marty's adventure nearly didn't exist. When Zemeckis approached Huey Lewis and the news to record a theme song, Lewis hesitated. He didn't want to sell out with a movie jingle. But after reading the script, he agreed, on one condition: the song couldn't mention time travel, DeLoreans, or flux capacitors. The result, The Power of Love, became a chart-topping anthem that defined the film's release. But here's the kicker. Lewis himself has a cameo in the movie, playing a high school judge who tells Marty his band is just too darn loud. Not rejection, self-parody. The band that gave the film its heart also laughed at themselves on screen. Without that gamble, the movie might have lacked its pulse-pounding musical signature. 19. Ronald Reagan quoted the film in real life. When Back to the Future premiered, one audience member was the President of the United States. Ronald Reagan reportedly loved the joke where Doc Brown scoffs at Marty's claim that Ronald Reagan is president in 1985. Reagan enjoyed it so much that during a State of the Union address, he quoted the line, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." It wasn't just Hollywood fiction anymore. It was a piece of American political theater. The moment blurred cinema with real-world power. A movie gag became presidential rhetoric, not just a blockbuster, a cultural echo chamber. The White House embraced Marty's adventure, elevating it from entertainment to national touchstone. It showed how deeply the film had embedded itself in the American psyche within months of release. 20th. The film almost didn't get made at all before Universal finally greenlit Back to the Future. Over 40 studios rejected it. Some said it wasn't edgy enough, lacking the raunchy teen humor popular in the 80s. Others thought time travel was too confusing for mainstream audiences. Disney flatly refused, calling the mother-son subplot inappropriate. Zemeckis and Gale spent years shopping the script, facing rejection after rejection. Rejection. It wasn't until Spielberg stepped in and pushed Universal to take the risk that the project gained traction. What audiences now see as a perfectly crafted blockbuster was once considered unmarketable, not an obvious hit, a gamble. The irony is brutal. Hollywood nearly erased one of its greatest treasures. Without persistence, Marty McFly might have stayed on the page forever. Bonus fact, the Delorean almost got scrapped from the sequel. Here's the mind bender. When planning Part 2, Universal briefly considered dropping the Delorean altogether. Studio executives argued it had run its course and wanted a sleeker, futuristic device instead. Fans would never know it, but concept art even toyed with a time-traveling hoverpod. Zemeckis fought hard to keep the car, arguing that it wasn't just a prop, it was the franchise's soul. He won. And in the sequels, the DeLorean became even wilder, flying through skies and skimming across the Old West. Not disposable, immortal. That battle to keep the stainless steel machine ensured Back to the Future retained its visual identity. Without it, the trilogy might have faded like Marty's photograph. Back to the Future wasn't just a movie, it was lightning in a bottle. Dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgettable. From stunt wires snapping to presidents quoting Doc Brown, from lawsuits over actors' likenesses to the car that refused to die, its legacy was built on chaos and luck as much as genius. It's the rare film where every disaster turned into magic on screen. So next time you hear the DeLorean rev to 88 miles per hour, remember, you're not just watching a story, you're witnessing the scars, the risks, and the miracles that made it possible.